Emotional clarity is often pursued through conversation. When confusion arises inside a relationship, many assume that more dialogue will resolve it. They explain, analyze, revisit, and reinterpret events in search of understanding. While communication has value, it is frequently misused as a substitute for structure. Without structure, discussion multiplies interpretations instead of resolving them. Clarity does not emerge from talking alone. It emerges from alignment between behavior, boundaries, and orientation over time. Structure refers to the consistent framework within which interaction occurs. It includes how decisions are made, how boundaries are held, how disagreement is handled, and how presence is maintained under pressure. When structure is weak, conversation becomes compensatory. People talk not to share insight, but to stabilize uncertainty. This creates circular dialogue. Each explanation generates new questions. Each clarification opens another layer of ambiguity. Emotional clarity recedes rather than advances. A man who relies on discussion to create clarity often misunderstands the source of confusion. Confusion rarely exists because information is missing. It exists because signals are inconsistent. Words say one thing while actions suggest another. Timing contradicts intention. Availability fluctuates without explanation. No amount of discussion can resolve contradictions that persist in behavior. Structure resolves what conversation cannot by removing contradiction at the source. Emotional systems prioritize pattern over explanation. They track reliability, coherence, and continuity. When structure is stable, emotional interpretation simplifies automatically. Fewer meanings are projected onto events. Silence does not provoke speculation. Delay does not trigger alarm. Neutrality does not imply withdrawal. Structure reduces interpretive load because it answers questions before they are asked. This is why emotionally mature individuals often speak less, not more. Their clarity does not depend on constant articulation. It depends on predictability of orientation. Others know where they stand without repeated confirmation. This does not eliminate conversation. It makes conversation efficient. Words refine understanding instead of attempting to manufacture it. Lack of structure also distorts emotional timing. Without a stable framework, emotions are processed either too quickly or too slowly. Issues are addressed prematurely to relieve discomfort or postponed indefinitely to avoid tension. Both extremes prevent resolution. Structure provides rhythm. It determines when engagement is appropriate and when space is necessary. Rhythm allows emotion to complete its natural cycle. Another consequence of weak structure is emotional bargaining. When clarity is absent, people negotiate for reassurance through dialogue. They ask indirect questions, seek validation, or probe for reaction. These behaviors are not manipulative by intention. They are attempts to locate stability. Strong structure removes the need for bargaining because position is already known. Emotional clarity also depends on role integrity. When roles blur, when leadership, responsibility, or boundaries shift unpredictably, confusion follows. Discussion attempts to repair this confusion verbally, but role inconsistency persists beneath the surface. Structure restores clarity by reestablishing role coherence through action rather than explanation. Importantly, structure does not eliminate emotion. It contains it. Containment allows expression without escalation. Escalation occurs when emotion lacks frame. Discussion without structure amplifies emotion because it stimulates interpretation without resolution. Structure channels emotion into intelligible movement. Attraction responds to this clarity because it reduces cognitive strain. Unclear dynamics require constant monitoring. Clear dynamics allow attention to relax. Relaxation deepens connection. This is why attraction often increases when fewer things are discussed, but more things are embodied consistently. Emotional clarity also determines how decisions are experienced inside a relationship. In poorly structured dynamics, decisions feel negotiable, provisional, or reversible. This ambiguity invites ongoing debate. Every choice becomes subject to revision. Emotional systems struggle under these conditions because they cannot settle. Structure transforms decision-making by making outcomes legible and final. Clarity emerges when decisions are anchored rather than explained. Another dimension of clarity involves consequence. When structure is absent, consequences are inconsistent. Boundaries are stated but not enforced. Preferences are expressed but not acted upon. Over time, this disconnect erodes trust. Emotional systems respond not to stated limits, but to observed outcomes. Structure restores clarity by aligning consequence with behavior. Clarity is also shaped by emotional containment during conflict. Without structure, conflict spills outward. Past issues resurface. Peripheral grievances enter the discussion. The original point becomes obscured. Structure constrains scope. It keeps disagreement within defined limits. This containment allows resolution without contamination. From a developmental perspective, emotional clarity reflects maturity of integration. Integrated individuals do not require exhaustive discussion to understand themselves or others. They recognize patterns quickly because internal reference points are stable. Fragmented individuals require constant verbal processing because internal signals are noisy. Structure quiets noise. Structure further influences how trust forms. Trust is not built through transparency alone. Transparency without consistency creates exposure without safety. Structure provides safety by ensuring predictability. Once safety exists, transparency becomes meaningful rather than destabilizing. Emotional clarity follows naturally. Another often overlooked effect is how structure reduces emotional fatigue. Endless discussion exhausts attention. It creates the sense that resolution is always just one more conversation away. Structure ends this cycle by resolving issues through action. Energy previously spent on analysis becomes available for connection. In relational systems, clarity also depends on exit conditions. When it is unclear what leads to continuation or separation, anxiety increases. Structure defines these conditions implicitly. People know what aligns and what does not through repeated evidence. This knowledge reduces fear because ambiguity diminishes. Emotional clarity does not mean agreement. It means comprehension. Two people can disagree clearly without confusion. Structure allows disagreement to exist without threatening the relationship's coherence. Discussion without structure turns disagreement into instability. Over time, structure becomes the silent communicator. It transmits values, priorities, and limits without words. Emotional systems trust this form of communication because it is difficult to falsify. Words can mislead, structure reveals. Ultimately, emotional clarity emerges when reality is allowed to organize itself around consistent behavior. Discussion then serves to deepen understanding rather than create it. When structure leads, conversation follows productively. When conversation leads without structure, clarity remains elusive. This is why emotionally healthy relationships are not those with the most dialogue, but those with the most coherent framework. Within that framework, emotion flows, conflict resolves, and attraction stabilizes without constant negotiation. Leadership inside relational dynamics is often misinterpreted as assertion, control, or the ability to impose direction through force of personality. This misunderstanding creates a distorted image of masculine authority, where dominance is mistaken for strength. In reality, dominance is a reaction to internal instability. It seeks to regulate the external environment because internal order is insufficient. True leadership operates differently. It does not attempt to overpower emotional systems. It organizes them. Containment is the core function of leadership. Containment does not restrict expression. It gives expression a boundary within which it can exist safely. Without containment, emotional energy disperses chaotically. With containment, that same energy becomes intelligible and directional. A man who leads through containment does not silence emotion, nor does he escalate it. He provides a stable frame that allows emotion to move without destabilizing the system. Dominance relies on force. Containment relies on structure. Force demands compliance. Structure invites orientation. Emotional systems respond negatively to force because force threatens autonomy. They respond positively to structure because structure reduces uncertainty. When a man provides containment, others feel less need to resist or test because the environment already feels ordered. Another key distinction lies in how authority is communicated. Dominance announces itself. It must be seen, felt, and acknowledged to exist. Containment does not require announcement. It is inferred through consistency of presence, proportional response, and reliability under pressure. Authority rooted in containment is quiet because it does not need validation. Authority rooted in dominance is loud because it depends on recognition. Containment also changes how tension behaves. In dominant dynamics, tension becomes a contest. Each emotional spike invites escalation or suppression. In contained dynamics, tension becomes information. It signals misalignment or transition without threatening collapse. The man does not rush to neutralize tension because tension is not interpreted as danger. This tolerance allows resolution to emerge naturally rather than being forced prematurely. Many men confuse leadership with decision-making speed. They believe that acting quickly demonstrates strength. In reality, speed without containment creates volatility. Decisions made to relieve discomfort often generate downstream instability. Leadership through containment prioritizes timing over speed. The man allows conditions to mature before intervening. This patience is not indecision. It is structural intelligence. Containment also preserves relational polarity. Dominance flattens polarity by turning interaction into opposition. Containment maintains polarity by allowing differentiation without conflict. The man does not need to oppose emotional movement to remain distinct. He remains distinct through orientation, not resistance. This distinction sustains attraction because it preserves asymmetry without hostility. Another critical aspect of containment is emotional bandwidth. A man who leads through dominance expends significant energy managing reactions, enforcing boundaries, and asserting position. A man who leads through containment expends far less energy because structure performs the regulatory work. Over time, dominance exhausts both parties. Containment stabilizes them. Leadership rooted in containment also prevents emotional flooding. Flooding occurs when emotional intensity exceeds the system's capacity to process it. Dominance attempts to shut flooding down. Containment expands capacity so flooding does not occur. This expansion happens through predictability, pacing, and non-reactivity. Emotional systems regulate themselves when capacity exists. Importantly, containment does not eliminate assertiveness. It refines it. Assertiveness expressed from containment is precise. It does not overshoot the target. It addresses the issue without collateral damage. Dominant assertiveness often overshoots because it is driven by urgency rather than alignment. Attraction responds to containment because containment signals safety without passivity. Safety without passivity preserves desire. Safety created through dominance suppresses desire because it replaces curiosity with compliance. Containment keeps curiosity alive because it does not dictate outcome. It allows engagement to remain voluntary. Leadership through containment also transforms how boundaries function. Dominant boundaries rely on enforcement. They must be defended repeatedly because they are challenged constantly. Contained boundaries are rarely challenged because they are experienced as part of the environment rather than rules imposed from outside. People adapt to environments instinctively. They resist rules cognitively. Containment further reshapes communication. In dominant dynamics, communication is often strategic. Words are chosen to win, convince, or assert position. In contained dynamics, communication becomes descriptive rather than persuasive. The man describes reality as he sees it without attaching emotional charge. Description carries more authority than argument because it does not require agreement to remain true. Another often ignored element of containment is emotional recovery. When mistakes occur, dominance seeks to restore authority quickly, often through justification or control. Containment allows recovery without dramatization. Errors are integrated rather than defended against. This integration preserves credibility. People trust leaders who can absorb error without destabilization. Containment also changes how influence propagates over time. Dominance creates short-term compliance but long-term resistance. Containment creates long-term orientation. People begin to self-correct in response to the structure provided. This self-correction is the hallmark of effective leadership. When systems regulate themselves, leadership has succeeded. In relational contexts, containment allows vulnerability to exist without reversal of polarity. Dominance often suppresses vulnerability to avoid appearing weak. Containment allows vulnerability because strength is not derived from invulnerability, but from capacity. Capacity can hold vulnerability without collapsing. This distinction deepens intimacy without eroding respect. From a psychological standpoint, containment reflects integration of impulse, emotion, and cognition. Dominance reflects over-identification with impulse. Containment reflects hierarchy within the self. When internal hierarchy exists, external hierarchy becomes unnecessary. Others sense this immediately. They orient naturally toward internal order. Containment also clarifies exit conditions. Dominant systems rely on pressure to maintain connection. Contained systems allow separation without hostility. When alignment is lost, containment permits clean disengagement. This preserves dignity and prevents resentment. Attraction does not require coercion to exist. When coercion appears, attraction has already collapsed. Over time, containment becomes the defining feature of masculine leadership. Not the ability to overpower, but the ability to hold. Not the ability to demand, but the ability to frame. Not the ability to control others, but the ability to regulate self under emotional load. This is why leadership should never be confused with dominance. Dominance compensates for instability. Containment emerges from structure. One escalates conflict, the other organizes it. One demands compliance, the other invites alignment. Relationships that endure do so not because one person dominates the emotional field, but because someone provides enough containment for emotion to move without destroying the system. That capacity is rare. It is also unmistakable. And that is why leadership rooted in containment generates attraction, trust, and longevity. Not through force, but through form.